I'm Dr. Michael Szolowicz. People call me Dr. S. And so I'll be presenting here today for the Crafting a Winning Personal Statement and Resume for Education. And just a little bit about me. Believe it or not, I have 26 years of experience in education. This is actually my 27th year right now in education. So I've completed 26, currently in the 27th, and I've had kind of a little bit of a journey here. I spent 8 years as a teacher. I was a history teacher in a comprehensive public high school. Back then, we called it inner city. That's how long ago it was. Now we call it an urban setting. And that was actually in the downtown area of downtown Tucson, which is hotter, but not quite as dusty as Bakersfield. So there is some similarities between where I came from and where I'm at now. I've also been a high school administrator at 2 different schools, both assistant principal and principal. Those were also high schools, one in a suburban area and one in kind of a small town, rural sort of setting. So I've kind of been all over the gamut here. And currently I'm a professor, I'm an assistant professor of educational administration at CSUB. And sometimes people ask me, what is educational administration? Like, what does that mean? And basically I teach teachers how to be principals. So if you are interested in becoming a principal at some point, I'm definitely the person you want to talk to in this town. So there we go. I also am the chair of the Graduate Directors RASG, that's Recruitment, Admission Standing, and Graduation Committee, which is kind of how I became involved with this particular presentation. And I think that goes to some university level leadership experience. This is my 4th year here at CSUB, so I'm happy to be serving on that committee in a kind of a graduate school-wide capacity. I'm also the co-director of the Educational Administration Program and core faculty in the Doctoral Program in Educational Leadership. I know the Doctoral Program has its own presentation going on, but I can answer questions about the DEPL as well. So if you're interested in getting your doctorate in Educational Leadership, again, you're in the right place. I can help you out with that as well. So, okay, so I want to provide a few definitions to kind of get this going. That's part of my teaching style, is to kind of introduce a topic and then provide some definitions to make sure that we're all on the same page, so to speak. And the first set of definitions I provided about resume and curriculum vitae, which it's a really interesting question. It literally took me until I arrived on the ground here at the university to figure out really what the difference between a resume and a CV actually are. And frankly, the definitions I'm providing for you here, which come from Merriam-Webster online, really don't do a good job of capturing the difference. So I'll explain that here in just a second. But for our purposes, in terms of applying to grad school, and really applying for a lot of different types of jobs that are outside of academia, the resume and the CV, for all intents and purposes, are kind of the same thing. So really, it's, I like the resume definition here the best. It's a short account of one's career accomplishments and qualifications. For grad school, I would say a 2-page CV or resume is pretty solid, pretty good. If you're going too much after that, I'm not sure how much we're going to continue reading after 2 pages and such. But 1 page I have found tends to be a little bit too tight. You can't really necessarily, in many cases, get across the information that you need in 1 page. So personally, I think in applying for grad school, a 2-page resume or a CV are really a good idea. And I'm not going to show it right now, but at the end of this presentation, if you want me to bring up my CV so you can kind of see a visual model of it, or if you just want to segue into that, just put a question in the chat. I'd be happy to bring it up. I've got it ready to go, and you can kind of see a model of my CV. Which will in turn be informative for your resume or CV if you choose to go that route. So I did say I would kind of get into the difference between a resume and a CV. And again, it took me literally until I was actually a professor to figure out what the difference actually is. So here it is. A resume is really a short, I'm seeing that. So, okay, so I'll go to my CV here in just a second. A resume is really a short summary of your accomplishments and qualifications that is related to the position you're applying for. So what you should be doing is communicating relevant experience, relevant education. And experience can be professional. In fact, it should be professional if you're going to grad school, and it can also be volunteer. You know, if you're going straight, I kind of think of, in my thinking, I'm often thinking in terms of educational administration. For my particular program, the state of California requires you to have 5 years of credentialed teaching experience. So applicants to my program, by definition, have professional experience. Now, there are other programs where you might be able to move straight from an undergraduate right into a graduate program without any real professional experience, and that's fine. Then you emphasize your education, any relevant experience you might have had, working jobs or such during school or whatever is certainly fine to put on those as well. But the idea is that it's a very concise 1 to 2 pages of relevant experience, academics, previous academics, and other qualifications that tells the hiring or the admissions committee how you're relevant to the program, basically. A CV is a very different purpose. In academia and some other jobs, a CV is really an ongoing list of what you've done. So to kind of put that in perspective, as a professor, you know, a lot of my work, many hours of the week, I'm very busy, but I'm not like directly supervised for by anybody, you know. So the CV is an ongoing record, updated very consistently about what I'm actually doing. You know, so somebody can look at it and get a sense of how I'm spending my work day. Now here's a very key suggestion, a takeaway, if you will. I think it's a very good idea to start a CV for yourself. And every few weeks, certainly once a month, take a look at your CV, which again is an ongoing list of things that you've accomplished, that you're done, that you're in the process of doing, and add to that CV. Did you do any professional development this week or this month? Did you start a new job? Did you go to a special training? Did you attend a workshop? Anything that might be relevant in any way, shape, or form to a future admissions committee or a future hiring committee for a job you're going to, just put on your CV. And a CV, if you start doing that, it's not going to take long where that CV is going to run 10, 15, 20 or more pages. My CV, I think, is up to 20. And, you know, I've got, what, 26 years of experience, but in my current job, it started adding up pretty quickly because there's a lot more little nuts and bolts things to document. But here's the thing, if you keep an ongoing CV going on, then when you apply to graduate school or later on when you apply for a job, you've got a whole list of things that you've already can draw from. And so instead of sitting down and like, oh, I have to write this resume, what do I do? You just review your CV and you copy and paste into a new document the relevant items that are important and relevant to the job or the grad school program that you're applying for. So let's see here. I did see the yes part. So here we go. I'm going to change the screen size because I think that's a bit hard to read. Any bigger and probably get too difficult to see. So I just took a look at it this morning. And again, this is an academic CV. A resume might be a little bit different, but I think there are some similarities and I'll point those out here. So I think the first thing that you'll notice that I personally really like is kind of a very clean looking. You notice there's not a lot of like italicized. There's not a lot of italics. There's not a lot of bolding. I did bold my name. That's very important. I want to see your name very front and center. But you'll see after that, there's really not a whole lot of italics. There's not a lot of bolding. I'm just making it very clean and simple. The timing when you do things is kind of important. So you'll notice on the left-hand side that the year is listed there. Now, this is also kind of important. If you're applying to grad school, and you're doing a resume, you don't necessarily need like everything you've ever done. You're selecting the most relevant experience, but we still want to have a sense of when you did it. You know, so you know, if you've had a whole bunch of different jobs and it's going to take 2 pages just to list all those jobs, you want to pick out the relevant ones. And I think your most recent ones certainly are relevant by definition because they've been recent, but there may be other things that you include in there as well to keep it within that 2-page limit. So you'll also notice I've got a professional address. You might use your personal address here or not. You know, if you're applying for an employer, sometimes you don't need to put your address, especially if you're applying out of state. But I do have mine here. What is important is an email address. I have my work email address listed here. You could use your work email address. I would recommend that you actually have, again, I'm thinking graduate school, but I'm also thinking future employment with this, is to have a kind of a professional account. So like a Gmail account that you set up and use just for your professional items. Keep your name relevant to you, but simple and nothing like too silly, you know, so you can run into some real problems with those, you know, with goofy or even kind of unprofessional type names. So, you know, keep it simple and keep it professional and keep it relevant. And then you'll notice as we go down here, education is important. As an admissions committee, I do want to know your education. So this is very important. What degrees do you have? What schools were they from? Do you have any honors or awards with them? You'll notice that with my bachelor's, I graduated summa cum laude. So I'll add those, you know, into that as well. So any type of honors and awards and such you can include in there as well. I have professional appointments for a resume. I might put like professional experience or relevant professional experience. And this is where I would list like if you're applying to my program in educational administration, we already know that you're a teacher. Just to be qualified to move, a teacher or a librarian or a school nurse or, you know, something in education, you know, so you'd be listing that right there. So professional appointments or professional experience, relevant professional experience, anything like that. I have publications. Being a professor, you know, I don't know, some people have publications, probably not, so that's not a big worry. If you have them, great. You can see my teaching experience, but that's just for the university. I've got a bunch of conference presentations and such, but I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom to some other things that are a little more relevant to a resume. Here's a category: service. So as a professor, I've got multiple categories of service: service to profession, service to university, and so on. You might just put service. You know, if you have volunteer service, community service, those types of experiences always look good as well. And a lot of service you can see here. Here's a professional learning. So if you've got some, you know, you've attended conferences or you've attended workshops or things like that, that kind of point to the idea of you're genuinely interested in the program and the topic of the program, that you've attended some extra training on your own. And it kind of shows that now by enrolling in the program, you want to get more. Can be very, very helpful there. And here, this part, professional experience, this is actually where I've drawn from my prior professional experience. And you can see the format changed a little bit, but I listed the years and where it's located, and then a list of kind of highly relevant items. Now, if I was doing this as a resume rather than a CV, I might keep it to 3 bullet points for each of those things. The other thing that I like to have is action. So you'll notice each word or each line starts with an action verb: increased, promoted, implemented, managed, mentored. You know, so I work very hard to put an action verb at the very beginning. So, and then a section of awards and professional organizations. If you're a part of professional organizations, again, especially as they are relevant to the program that you're applying for, those can be very helpful as well. It shows that, again, you're going above and beyond, you're stepping outside of yourself and becoming involved with others. And it indicates to an admissions committee that you're also now interested in pursuing this program to increase your capacity in your field. Let's see here. So I do see a question. I'll pause there. Should I also include my AA or just bachelor's? Yeah, I would definitely include your associates. That is a significant accomplishment. So put your associates, and then right here where I've got like years dated, you can put like next to your bachelor's, if that's something you're still working on, you can put in progress. In fact, I'll scroll back up here and give you an example from a different section. You'll see I've done this with my current writings, the ones that are actually published. I've got a date that it was actually published. but then the ones that I'm currently working on, I put in progress. So you can do something like that. If you want to put a year, let's see here, there's another example. I was just there, and then you can put like the year and then to present. There we go. So here's another way to do it. So the year that you started, present to, and then the year that you started. So if you've been, pursuing your bachelor's for 2 years, you'd put the year that started 2019, present to 2019, or just put in progress would be a good way to do that. Okay, pause there and see if there's any more questions regarding CVs and resumes. Seeing none, I guess I'll move on. All right. So that's a quick overview of the CV resume. And as you can see from the model that I just showed you, it's really kind of in an outline form. A CV resume, it should be very easily readable, very quickly readable, but really gets to the point of what you have done, why you are qualified for this program, and why the program is relevant to who you are based on your experience. The personal statement is where you get a chance to explain things a little bit more. And again, I would say with the personal statement, as you'll see in a second here, I've actually got some sample personal statements that we're going to take a look at. But usually you only get 1 to 2 pages, and those are 1 to 2 pages. You could probably get away with like 1.5 space, maybe single spaced, but 2 pages single space starts to get like pretty intense read. So, I would recommend more like a 1.5 space maybe, or keep it shorter to the 1 page. If they're limiting you to 1 page only, then a single space certainly is fine. But the bottom line is you don't get a whole lot of space to tell your story, but it is an opportunity where you can elaborate on what you've shared in the CV. So the personal statement should complement your CV or resume quite nicely, where you now elaborate a little bit more on what's documented in that. So with the personal statement, you're going to be able to explain a little bit about how your personal and professional development, for example, are relevant to the program, or what you've gained from them, and why being part of this program that you're applying for is going to help you out even more. It might talk a little bit, again, about the academic background and objectives, doing the same thing. How did your previous experience and academic experience prepare you for this next step? And you might also talk a little bit about career goals and plans within that. But again, all of this should help to inform the admissions committee. So if you look at the top of the slide there, actually the middle right of the slide, it says inform. This is your opportunity to describe, explain, and inform the committee of some things that are relevant and important to you and about who you are that's relevant to this program that you're applying for, that they would not be able to gather otherwise from just your resume or CV. So let's go ahead and take a look. I've got 2 slides here of sample prompts. And what I did for this is I just went to CSUB and looked at 4 education programs, the master's programs. And the first one, of course, is my own. So if you were to apply to the Educational Administration program, you can see that statement there kind of in the middle of your screen. CSUB also has a curriculum and instruction program, and I actually teach in that program as well. I had the opportunity to teach the 6100. It's an introduction to research methods for educators this summer. It was a great experience. So I mentioned earlier, and since you mentioned it sounds like you might be working on your bachelor's degree. So the Educational Administration program, you do need 5 years of credentialed teaching before you can apply. And there's a whole list of other requirements as well. So you do have to have an established professional track record before you'd be qualified to apply for the program. And that's not my doing. In fact, I would much rather reduce that or even eliminate it because it would open up more access to the program. However, it is a state requirement for my particular field. The state of California will not issue the administrative credential until you meet certain requirements. So we make those requirements our admissions, baseline admissions requirements, so that we're sure you're qualified for the credential when you finish the program. The curriculum instruction program is different, however. you can, I'm pretty sure you can go into it straight out of your bachelor's degree. I do tend to think sometimes that getting, especially in education, getting a little bit of experience in the field, a year or two before jumping into a master's program might be a good idea, because I think once you have some real world experience, on the ground experience, some of the things in a master's program, I want to say would make more sense, but that's not really the best way to put it. You have some more prior knowledge. You'll go, oh, I see why that's important, or golly, this is a problem I'm facing, and now here's the master's programs giving me some ideas on how to solve or address that problem, which is a little different than like just having a theoretical base. So that's something to consider as well. But I did put some words in yellow here, which again emphasize this is the opportunity to explain, describe, include. You're informing the committee about what you are bringing to this program. Here's sample 2. We have CSUB counseling and special education. You can see on these, the statement's a little bit longer, 2 to 4 pages rather than 1 to 2 pages. And you would want to check with the program, like on the directions on the website or the portal where you're applying, Cal State Apply, where you're applying for these. You might want to check as to if they have any formatting directions, double space, single spaced, font. I think using either Times New Roman or Calibri font in either an 11-point or 12-point size is really good. Any smaller than that, it starts to get hard to read. We're professors, we do a lot of reading, but that also puts a strain on the eyesight. So make it easy for us. Calibri or Times New Roman in 11 or 12-point font is a pretty standard and widely accepted style. That makes, and it's that way because they're relatively easy to read. So I'll pause here for a second and see if there's any questions or comments about the prompts. I'm also going to take a sip of water.
So I do have a question regarding the word reasons. What is it meant by reasons? I'm not quite grasping the reasons part.
So you would want to talk about your motivations. If like I'm assuming you're looking at the counseling page there. So you want to talk about why you want to become a counselor. What's motivating you to become a counselor or an education administrator or a special education teacher or whatever. We're trying to get at your motivation for that. So that might make a little bit more sense also later on, because my final slide is actually titled Kisses of Death. There are some things to avoid, and which is kind of a fun slide. So when we get to that here in a few minutes, you'll kind of see some reasons that you probably want to avoid putting into your application, and it might help explain, as to what you should. So, but I'm seeing the thumbs up as well, so I guess we're good to move on. All right. So I guess one of the things that, I've obviously applied to and been accepted to 2 graduate programs. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I have 100% application and acceptance rate to graduate programs. I've only applied to 2 and I got accepted both of them, my master's and then later on my PhD. I don't have the same track record with applying for jobs, but that's another story for another day. So, whether you're applying for a job or for applying to a graduate program, I always wondered, what are they looking for? And so this part of the presentation, I want to give you a little bit of insight into what we as professors are looking for as part of this admissions committee. You've put together your resume, your personal statement, and all the other materials we're asking for. What are we really looking for? And it really boils down to 3 things. We are concerned about your academic ability. There are things like writing in a program like this or like these that I've just shown you. So we want to be sure that you have the capacity to be able to actually do the program. Now at CSUB, and I know in my program particularly, I am very interested in also cultivating people developing their capacity, helping them grow. So I'm not looking for people necessarily who are entering my master's program who are like published authors. You know, I know there's a lot of writing in my program, but they don't need to be published authors, but I do need to see that you have the capacity to write. And so the personal statement becomes a prime area where I can see that. Can you organize some thoughts? Can you make a, you know, is the flow okay? Can you, you know, spelling and grammar, those types of things. Can you actually write at a level that I feel I can then build upon as we go through the program? And so we are concerned about that academic ability. There are some elements also, you know, there's a lot of reading associated with a lot of these programs. And there's a close relationship between reading and writing. If you can write well, you usually can read well, and vice versa. And so there's a lot that we can infer or deduce from the personal statement about your academic ability that is helpful. Other areas, I mean, certainly prior degrees on your resume certainly point to your academic ability. Any sort of awards that you've received, either again like summa cum laude type things, or if there's any other academic awards. Like in my undergraduate days, I had I can't remember. I want to say it was like kind of like a honors award. It wasn't an outstanding student award. It's basically if you got a certain GPA for that semester, they gave you a little plaque, you know, which was a really cool plaque. It was wood, laser engraved and everything. I still have it. But, you know, those types of things kind of points to the academic ability as well. But just the simple fact of writing the personal statement shows us that you can actually write. And so there we go. Another thing that we're looking for is our ability to support you. And I've already kind of touched on that a little bit. Again, we're educators. We realize that you're at a certain level when you come in, and our job is to help you grow to a new level. And we want to be able to be sure that we can support you in doing that. And then also, we're very interested in not just supporting you, but making a broader impact to the world through you. So let me put it this way. When I was teaching as a high school teacher in urban Tucson, Arizona, my goal was to see my students succeed. So, and these were high school students, so I wanted to see them succeed. And then I went through a master's program in educational leadership, got my administrative credential, and became an assistant principal and principal. And my goal was still to see the students in my schools succeed. But I realized as a principal that I had to develop teachers. I had to work with the teachers and make sure the teachers' capacity was developed and such in order to see the student success. And so now here as a professor of educational administration, it just all moves up one level. I'm still interested in seeing students succeed. But I realized that in order to have student success, you need to have teacher success. In order to have teacher success, you need to have effective and equity-driven leadership, school leadership success. And so I'm looking for your capacity to actually to become a school leader, whether it's a school administrator or a leadership role. There's lots of different leadership roles that people can assume within a school. And I'm interested in not just developing you, but are you then going to turn around and move into a new position that's going to have a great impact as well? So we are kind of interested in that. Whether it's special ed or counseling or curriculum instruction, what is, as we invest into you, what is your potential impact going to be on you know, on your school and on your community and on society? So I would say those three things are pretty critical things in the back of our mind, if not the forefront of our minds, as to what we're looking for. And I'll go ahead and pause there for a moment. Okay. So I talked a little bit earlier about the resume and then inform and describe on the personal statement. And I think part of the question is, what do you elaborate upon? What do you describe? What do you choose? And I think the key there is really to answer this question that I've got on the slide in front of you. So how have your experiences prepared you for success in this program, in this particular program that you're applying for? You know, I was debating if I'm going to share this example or not, because in a way it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it undermines my credibility, but I think this might help. So my daughter recently graduated from Northern Arizona University, like last spring, and she has a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Graphic Communications. So she applied to a few grad schools and didn't get into any of them. And I was like shocked. I'm like, she's already taking graduate classes as part of her undergraduate and everything. And I'm like, what is going on here? Well, one of the key things that came up is I realized somewhere in the process of her applying. Now she's living in Flagstaff, finishing up her degree while making these applications. Well, she's applying basically to painting programs. She wanted to paint, like fine arts, programs. Her paintbrushes were at home here in Bakersfield. And I'm like, so I ended up having to tell her, I'm like, look, the system probably did you a little bit of a favor, Yeah, it was, I'm like, I know it's disappointing, and I'm a bit surprised you didn't get into some of these programs. And again, she applied to like some pretty elite programs here on the West Coast. And I said, here's kind of the bottom line. The system did you a little bit of a favor. You don't like painting enough to actually have your paintbrushes at the place that you're living. So why would you want to go into grad school and spend the tuition money and the cost of living, to do the grad school? That's going to put you into some degree of debt for something that maybe you're not totally into, so again, she had some experiences related to the programs that she applied for, but it wasn't really enough. And the motivation probably wasn't, in my assessment, wasn't really there either. So I was like, you know what, get a job and gain some experience. If you want to go back to grad school later, you can do, maybe apply in a few years, or maybe pick a different program. She has some leadership ability, and she's talked about getting an MBA instead of a fine arts master's program. I'm like, that's a great way to go too. Get some experience, and maybe the MBA is the better way to go for you. So, but I think that kind of illustrates the point. If you're going to spend the money and the time and the energy that's going to take to complete a master's program, make sure it's something that is highly relevant to you, that it's something you really want to do, and that you're actually kind of already doing stuff for. And I think your own self-evaluation of your experiences kind of will help to answer that. So if you're applying to a Master's of Fine Arts program at UC Berkeley and you don't have your paintbrushes at home with you, it's probably, maybe I just want to stop and think, golly, is this really what I really want to do? Do I want to spend all that money, live in the Bay Area, for this type of thing? So anyway, regardless of that assessment, when you do write your personal statement, you do want to keep it precise, concise, and relevant. So what are the experiences that are relevant to this program? Again, if you're finding you don't have any relevant experiences to the program, is it the right program? Is it the right time? That's something maybe to consider. And then do keep it precise and concise. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. Got a few more slides here. And it's so strange. I go into these and I'm like, will I be able to talk for an hour? And now I'm looking at the time going, will I finish within the hours? So, all right. So I guess the next question that I have in my mind then is people are like, okay, so you're telling me to put in relevant experiences. Well, how do I know what is relevant? So do a little bit of homework, do a little bit of research. And this is, I think, good advice in my view for applying to a graduate school program, but it's also really good advice for applying for a job later on. So you want to know a little bit about the program and the people in that program that you're applying to. So how do you do this? Go to the program's webpage, take a look at their webpage, look them up on social media. A lot of programs, if they have social media, will have indicators of what those are on their website, or you can just start searching them on Instagram or whatever. I know my particular program, we have for educational administration, we have 4 social media accounts. I don't control the Twitter one, so I'm not really up to date on that one. I just started LinkedIn, so there's only like 3 posts. everybody loves Instagram. So most of my interaction is on Instagram. I have hundreds of followers on Instagram, and that's actually resulted in some students joining us. I'm looking through the Instagram the other day and I'm like, oh, so-and-so liked this latest post, and oh, that's somebody actually in the program right now. So it's a great way to interact and get to know the program, but it's also letting us see you a little bit, out there. As well. And Facebook, I have my Instagram and Facebook accounts connected, so they're exactly the same, but nobody uses Facebook unless, like, I use Facebook, but I'm over the age of 40, believe it or not. So there we go. But again, just do some research, and you're looking for, what is this program about? What are they hoping to do? I think it's a good idea to also look at the faculty a little bit. And see what the faculty interests are and make sure that they're in alignment with what you're doing. And also kind of gets to this idea of, if you see that they have in their bio that they have a certain research interest or a certain, interest in supporting something, you might want to write to that a little bit. I noticed you have an interest, the faculty has an interest in, developing equity-driven leaders in my case. I also am interested in equity-driven leadership and like to learn more about data analysis or whatever to get to it. So, so again, you can kind of do your homework, find out what they're interested in, make sure that's a good way to make sure it's a good fit for you as well. Sometimes I have another example. This goes back a long time, a few decades, but I had a friend back in Tucson who went to graduate school at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona for hydrology. And you would think like, oh, you should just like go to Harvard, right? Well, for hydrology, the best program in the world really is at the University of Arizona. So even though he's living in Tucson, grew up in Tucson, that was really the best program for him in terms of prestige universally, and also for him as well. I can say with CSUB, our focus is we are a regional teaching college. So our primary focus is developing teachers, leaders, counselors who are going to make an impact in our schools within our region. And our region is Antelope Valley, the Antelope Valley area, and then of course the Southern San Joaquin Valley. But we also draw a lot of students from California City, kind of Tehachapi, kind of the east side of the mountains there as well. And we draw students from as far north as Porterville. I've had a couple people in my class from Porterville who make the trek. Actually with Zoom, it makes it a whole lot easier for them now. But we have a pretty wide service region. Now, I also tell my applicants, are you locked into staying in this region? No, I came from Tucson. Quite honestly, I didn't know Bakersfield existed until I applied for a job here. I actually think it's a great place in many ways, but you never know where life is going to take you. So you can take advantage of the resources and opportunities presented to build a strong community here in the Southern San Joaquin Valley and Antelope Valley. But also we're aware that you may move on as well, and that's fine too. So we're willing to support that as well. You can also reach out and just talk to faculty, email them. Hey, I'm interested in your program and I have this question. Or with the COVID, we don't have office hours that well anymore, but that's another opportunity, is make an appointment or drive down to campus and see if you can meet with them. But again, I'd set an appointment, reach out via email or something first, because our office hour thing is kind of all over the map at the moment. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking here and I'll take any final questions because this is my last substantive slide. So the kisses of death, and I'm drawing this slide a little bit from some research that I read. There's actually been, journal articles that are published about applying to graduate schools. And so I did, in preparation for this program or this presentation, read a few of them. And one of them is actually titled Kisses of Death. I thought that's such a great title. I'm going to use it in my own presentation, properly cited on the last slide as well, of course, but also a little bit from my own experience. So there's a few of them here. Excessive and irrelevant disclosure. So from the research that I've read, some of the elements of excessive and irrelevant disclosure are people writing literally like, I get a great thrill out of visiting the morgue. Okay, that's kind of creepy. Not sure. I'm not sure I really want to support that as an admissions committee. I'm interested in becoming a counselor or a school psychologist because I have a long history of untreated mental illness, quote unquote. Okay, that's concerning, So, things like that. Now, it's not unusual, like in a counseling program, especially where people want to get into these programs because they do have some personal interest. That's okay, but you don't want to dwell on it. You don't want to get into too much detail. You can say, that it's okay to talk about a little bit of personal relevance, but you don't want to dwell on it and don't get too excessive on it. In educational administration and in the doctoral program in educational leadership, I haven't seen anything that extreme. What I do see in terms of excessive and irrelevant disclosure is just kind of rambling, like literally by personal statements that start, I was born a very young child, and then they go through their childhood and their teenage years and just kind of ramble on and on. I'm like, I don't care, really, I just don't, So now if there's something that happened in your teenage year, you had an interaction with an assistant principal while you were in high school and that inspired you to want to be a leader someday, that would be a great thing to talk about, so that's fine. But this gets back to that relevant piece. What from your experience is relevant to the program that you are applying for without getting into morbid or creepy or just odd, things. So statements of exaggerated altruism is kind of along the same lines. This gets to the idea of like, I feel I am destined to help everybody in the world, I want to save all the children, I want to see all the children succeed. Okay, so we do have an entire national law based on No Child Left Behind, but this is just kind of vague and it doesn't do a whole lot for me. So you do want to be altruistic because remember, part of what we're looking for is we're looking for your capacity. As we develop your capacity, how are you going to turn around and impact others for the positive good as well? So we want to see some impact, some ideas of what you might want to do with this later on. For me as an educational leader, I was very interested, well, I've already said it a few times, effective and equity-driven leadership. So if I had a candidate who started talking about that as part of what their altruism, what they want to do, I want to be an equity-driven leader and would like to learn more about how to do that. I mean, that's fantastic. But just try to keep it a little bit more specific, instead of saving all the children, maybe you want to develop literacy more, or maybe you have a particular concern with students with ADHD, for whatever reason. I don't know, whatever it might be, but just try to avoid these flowery, glowing, vague, and ultimately meaningless statements, and just try to be a little bit more specific about who you are and why you're interested in this and what you hope to accomplish through this program. Lack of knowledge of the program, I touched on that a little bit earlier with my daughter's example. It's like, but this can play the other way. The program might be a great fit for you, but if you don't know that, if you haven't done that homework we just talked about, like if you haven't demonstrated that you know what you're getting into, that can kind of be a kiss of death here as well. I want to share an example actually from my professional life that illustrates this. So I worked for an assistant superintendent who was on all the hiring committees in one of the districts I was in. And he always, in every interview, I should say every administrative interview, he always asked the same question: what are the school colors? This is like interviews for assistant principals and principals at a school site. So what are the school colors and the school mascot? If you didn't answer that question correctly, you weren't getting the job because it showed that you didn't do your homework. So, having some idea of what the program is about and communicating that somehow in your paper is a really good idea. Failed attempts to oppress. This takes two major forms. The first one is name dropping. I know so-and-so, so therefore I should be able to, yeah, that's just kind of weird. Don't do it, especially in writing. So now if you're having a conversation with somebody and it comes up and there's a networking kind of connection or something, that's a little different. But in writing, you don't want to be name dropping. The other way that people fail to impress, and I'm having a mind blank. Oh, that's it. Criticizing other people or programs. You know, so anything, if don't put in writing in your personal statement that you're putting down, I didn't like this other program because, or I didn't want to do your program earlier when so-and-so was there, you know, don't criticize other people or programs. Keep it very positive, keep it very focused as to why you are a good fit for this particular program. Okay. And then poor writing, I've already mentioned that. Spelling, grammar, things like that. You know, just it'd be a very good idea to have somebody proofread it for you. My son is getting ready. He's at BC right now. He's getting ready to apply for some four-year colleges and some jobs. A little up in the air which direction he's going to go at the moment. But you know, I've told him, as you start writing your personal statements or cover letters and such, you know, go to your counselor at BC, go to the Career Center, have somebody read it, have me read it if you want. But I think it's better to have somebody who's a little bit removed from you to take a look at it as well. So make sure that those are taken. Oh, on like Word, you know, it puts like underlines in red when the word is misspelled. Pay attention to all that stuff, you know. So it'll put a blue squiggly line if there's a grammar mistake. You know, don't just ignore that. Pay attention to all of that. Okay. All right. And then I do have some references. There's the Kisses of Death one, just so that Appleby and Appleby 2004 can get their proper citation and credit. And I guess my final statement here is we really want a good match. We want to bring people in, especially at a school like CSUB. You know, we are very interested in improving the educational capacity of this whole region. We want students, we want to admit you, but we do want to make sure that it's a good fit, that you're capable of doing the work, that the work is relevant to who you are and what you want to accomplish, and that you have the capacity to go ahead and kind of pay it forward to impact the world positively after you graduate from our program. And honestly, if you think about it, I suspect that's what you want as a candidate as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude.
Thank you, Dr. Szolowicz. Great presentation. I was just going through some memories of when I was applying for grad school, and it's really good information. And, you know, as someone who works in an educational administration, some of the resumes and CVs that come across are really, really good and have followed that advice. Some of them are those kisses of death, which is just really quite entertaining. So that's definitely, you know, good information that you want to just avoid as well. So